Okay, so get ready for this one, folks. We're diving into Melania Trump's memoir today.
Oh, wow.
I know what you might be thinking,
Hmm.
like politics, really, but just trust me on this one.
Yeah.
It's less about the actual policies and all that, and more about getting a peek behind the curtain, you know?
Right, behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. It's really her story, like all the way from a small town in Slovenia
Oh.
to the White House, you know?
I mean, what I think is really fascinating is how she captures both the extraordinary and the relatable, like all in the same book. You see glimpses of this like global icon, but then at the same time, she's a woman dealing with all the same everyday things we all face. Family, relationships, trying to find your place in the world. It's all in there.
Yeah, and she doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either.
No, not at all.
I mean, just imagine the pressure of being First Lady, constantly under scrutiny, especially these days with social media and everything.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like this constant tension between her wanting privacy, but also having this very public role.
Yeah.
And the memoir really digs into that whole struggle. And it makes you wonder, like, how much do we really know about people in the spotlight,
Exactly. It's like we all think we know these famous figures, but we're really only seeing what they want us to see.
Right.
So this memoir feels like she's like pulling back the curtain a little and actually letting us into her world.
I agree. It's like, for example, early on in her modeling career, there's this whole incident where she wins this big contest in Italy.
Uh-huh.
But get this, the prize money gets stolen.
What?
Yeah, crazy, right? But instead of just, letting it go, she absolutely refuses to work with that studio ever again.
Wow.
I think that says a lot about her character,
Yeah, definitely. It shows like this strong sense of ethics, this unwillingness to compromise her values, even way back then.
Right.
That kind of integrity seems to run through her whole life.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. And you see that same determination when she's dealing with all the craziness of the modeling world. I mean, think about it. She went from modeling in Slovenia to Milan, Paris, and then New York. It's a huge jump.
That's a huge leap, yeah.
Huge.
And it wasn't all like glitz and glamour, right? She talks about all the hard work,
Oh, yeah.
the long hours, the travel, even the rejections,
It's true. She gives you a real look at the less glamorous side of that industry, which I really appreciated.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
It reminds us that success takes real grit and resilience, even in a field like modeling.
Yeah.
And it makes her eventual success even more impressive.
Absolutely.
So, okay, imagine this. Picture this. Melania, already a successful model in Europe, sets her sights on New York City.
The Big Apple.
What do you think drew her there?
Well, she talks a lot about the energy of the city, the opportunities, that whole melting pot of cultures.
Yeah.
But that's also where she meets Donald Trump,
Oh, yeah.
which, as you can imagine, totally changes everything for her.
That meeting at the Kit Kat Club during Fashion Week is like legendary.
It's iconic.
It's iconic, yeah.
And it's really interesting how she describes their first interaction. She actually refused to give him her number at first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which it kind of challenges that image of her as passive or, easily swayed by money and power.
Right.
She was already a successful model on her own, and she wanted to get to know him on her terms.
I like that. It shows like a real independent streak, a willingness to stand her ground.
Totally.
Even with someone as powerful as Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the tabloids went crazy with their age difference, of course.
Oh, for sure. They ate that up.
Oh, yeah. But she addresses it directly in the memoir. She emphasizes how their connection went beyond age.
Right.
And that she never felt pressured or controlled by him at all.
It makes you realize how much of what we think we know about people is just media hype, not reality.
Exactly. It's all about the narrative.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that desire for privacy, it's something that comes up a lot in the book, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Just imagine dating someone who's constantly in the spotlight.
I can't even imagine.
It must be so hard.
It would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
You can really feel that tension, that push and pull between wanting to protect your life and having to deal with all the public attention.
Yeah.
And that just gets like a million times worse when he decides to run for president.
Oh, I bet.
It's like suddenly she's in this world of politics that she never wanted to be a part of.
Right.
You're just kind of watching her try to figure it all out while the whole world is watching her every move.
Yeah. Wow. That's got to be tough.
Yeah, it must have been crazy, like a whirlwind.
Totally. She describes it as like pure chaos, the campaign, all the traveling, the rallies, the debates. It's all in there.
And then like that shock of actually winning.
I can't even imagine.
Right. It's like you can almost feel how heavy that moment must have been for her, that realization that, like, their whole lives were about to change, like, completely.
Yeah, and on the
The
inauguration,
inauguration, oh my God.
moving into the White House, becoming First Lady.
Talk about pressure.
Seriously,
Yeah.
remember all the talk about her fashion choices?
Oh, yeah, of course. Like, every single outfit was analyzed.
That blue Ralph Lauren outfit she wore to the inauguration.
Iconic.
Iconic, yeah.
It's like, it just shows you how, like, every little thing a first lady does is under a microscope, you know?
For sure.
And for Melania, it was even more intense because she was already, like, this huge fashion icon.
Right.
People were watching to see, like, what she would do with the role, you know?
Totally. And let's not forget about the whole plagiarism thing with her speech at the Republican National Convention.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Huge media frenzy.
I mean, I get why she felt overwhelmed in that situation, but it did raise some questions, you know?
Yeah.
About her team, maybe even about how much she was involved herself.
It's like a reminder to be careful, especially on such a big stage.
Totally, you got to own your message, especially when the whole world is watching.
It's interesting how she looks back on that in the book.
Yeah.
She kind of admits that she made mistakes and that she learned from them.
Which is important. I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like that whole thing made her even more determined to, like, control her own story.
I think you're right. That need for control comes up a lot, especially when she talks about her Be Best initiative.
Right. Like, on the surface, it was about things like cyberbullying and kids' well-being.
Important stuff.
Really important. But it also kind of felt like she was trying to, like, carve out her own space,
I see what you mean, like separate from all the political stuff surrounding her husband.
Exactly. It's fascinating because you can see this, like, genuine desire to do good, especially for kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people were questioning whether it was all, like, sincere.
Right, especially with, some of the things her husband was doing online.
It definitely sparked a lot of debate, which I guess shows that she could, like, grab people's attention.
Oh, absolutely. She knew how to get people talking.
Even if it wasn't always the conversation she wanted to have.
Exactly. And then there's that trip to the border during the family separation crisis, remember?
Oh, yeah, that was a turning point for her public image, for sure.
I mean, those pictures of her with that jacket, the I really don't care, do you jacket?
Oh, man.
It was like a total PR disaster.
People saw it as, like, really cold and insensitive.
Right, like she was totally out of touch with what those families were going through.
She tries to explain it in the book, saying it was meant for the media, not the kids.
Yeah, but it didn't really work.
No, not at all.
I kind of solidified that image of her as being, like, distant and uncaring.
It shows how, like, your actions can have a bigger impact than your words,
Oh, yeah, especially in politics.
And it's about symbols, too, right? That jacket became a symbol, whether she meant it to be or not.
Exactly. It's hard to escape those kinds of symbols once they're out there.
But beyond all the drama and controversy, what I found really interesting was her descriptions of life inside the White House.
I know, it's like a peek into this whole other world.
A world that most of us will never see.
Yeah, she talks about state dinners and meeting world leaders and, like, just the constant pressure of being in the public eye.
Yeah, and there's this one story about her meeting the Pope at the Vatican.
Oh, wow.
Which seemed really important to her, especially because she's Catholic.
That makes sense.
And then there's the more personal stuff, too, like how she tried to keep things normal for her son, Barron.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine raising a kid in the White House?
I can't even imagine.
It sounds like she really worked hard to create a stable environment for him, even with everything else going on.
It shows how dedicated she is to her family, which is something you see throughout the whole book.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also makes you think about all the sacrifices that come with public life, trying to balance your personal life with, all the demands of being in the spotlight.
It's a tough balancing act.
And then, of course, there's the end of their time in the White House, the 2020 election, and everything that came after that.
Yeah, that was a wild time.
I know. It felt like the whole world was, like, watching.
She really doesn't hold back on her thoughts about that whole period, the 2020 election and everything.
Right.
You really get a sense of, like, her anxiety during the campaign, waiting for the results, and then, the disappointment of losing. She even talks about some of the controversies and, like, echoes some of the concerns that were going around back then.
She's definitely not afraid to share her opinion.
No, not at all.
You can tell she feels strongly about certain issues.
And she's not afraid to say it, even if it might ruffle some feathers.
It's kind of refreshing, actually.
Yeah, it is. She's not trying to, like, please everybody or present this perfect image. She's just, being real.
It's raw. It's honest.
And that makes it so much more interesting to read.
Totally. And then there's her account of January 6th, the Capitol riots. She was actually in the White House that day.
Wow.
Yeah, she was overseeing the archival photography of the residents.
It's chilling to read her description of that day.
It really is.
She talks about, like, watching it all happen on TV and the fear, worrying about her family.
Right.
And then they had to evacuate to the bunker.
It's a crazy story.
It really puts you right there, like you're experiencing it with her.
Yeah, and it makes you realize, like, how fragile things can be, even in a place like the White House.
Absolutely.
And how dangerous it can be to be in the public eye.
Oh, yeah, even for people like her who seem untouchable.
And she's pretty critical of how the media covered it all.
Oh, really?
She felt like they just made it worse, trying to divide people even more.
That seems to be a theme for her, this feeling of being constantly judged and misrepresented by the media.
Yeah, it's like she keeps coming back to that jacket incident.
The "I really don't care" jacket.
Yeah, she insists it was meant for the media, not for those kids at the border.
Right.
It's like she feels really misunderstood.
It's like this is her chance to set the record straight, to finally tell her side of the story.
Yeah, and she gets into some really personal stuff, too, like the time someone tried to assassinate her husband.
Wow, I hadn't even thought about that.
It's a powerful part of the book.
I bet.
She talks about the fear, the relief, when she found out he was okay.
It reminds you that, like, behind all the public stuff, she's just a person.
A wife, a mother.
Yeah, going through these intense things.
And she talks about the challenges of being a woman in the spotlight, too. All the double standards and the scrutiny of her appearance.
And that's gotta be tough.
And she's open about her beliefs,
Mm.
even when they're not popular. Like, she talks about her views on abortion.
Wow, that's brave.
Yeah. And she does it in a really thoughtful way.
Yeah.
It's not just like slogans or talking points. It's her own perspective.
I like that it's refreshing to hear someone just be real about these complex issues.
Yeah, it's like she's finally found her voice and she's using it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that she ends the book with this message of, like, unity and compassion,
Real.
Yeah, it's like even after all the fighting and attacks, she still believes in, like, finding common ground and understanding each other.
That's actually really nice to hear.
It's a good way to end a book that's, like, both personal and really insightful. It's raw, it's honest, and it gives you this glimpse into a world that most of us will never know.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you wanting to learn more.
So what do you think, like, what's the takeaway from all this?
I think no matter what you think about Melania Trump or her politics, this memoir gives us a chance to see things from her point of view.
Right.
It's a good reminder that, like, even public figures are just people with their own stories.
And that we should try to listen to those stories?
Exactly, with an open mind and be willing to question our own assumptions.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a fascinating read, full of surprises, and I definitely recommend it to anyone listening.
I second that. It's worth checking out.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into Melania Trump's memoir. We hope you enjoyed it.
We'll see you next time.